Welcome, everyone. Welcome, Highlander fans, to Blood of Kings, the Highlander podcast here on the Fandom Podcast Network. On the show, we cover everything from the Highlander universe. And on this episode here on Blood of Kings, episode 177, we're going back to Starlog Magazine. Now, Lee and I have been covering some recent episodes on Blood of Kings about Starlog and how big of a deal it was for us. And this specific one is special. We're going to be discussing the Highlander 3 1994 article and review it with the actual author and our friend of the network here and Blood of Kings, Mr. John Mosby. My name is Kevin, and if you are watching the Blood of Kings here on the YouTube, make sure you check us out. Subscribe. Here's our QR code here. Give us a shout out there. They'll take us to our Fandom Podcast Network site with all of our other audio podcasts on the network, including Blood of Kings. And again, we're talking Starlog, Highlander 3, the Sorcerer, or the whatever that other name that we sometimes call it, the Final Dimension. I am a big fan of Highlander. I've been to several of the filming locations. If you're watching the video, love showing these off here. But let's bring in my brother from another immortal mother here, so to speak. Let's bring in Lee. He knows some fight monkeys. What's going on, brother?
I'm doing pretty good. Excited to be doing this. It's unique in fandom for like couple random guys with a podcast to actually talk with the people that write the articles, that make the shows, do this stuff. It's really cool that we get to do what we do. And we got some great pictures of me there. Actually did get to play a Highlander, not Highlander, but like a actual Scottish Highland warrior during the Jacobite era. And one of those pictures there. Had a lovely sword fight with a couple of guys, and then got to wear the kilt and got to die gloriously because I'm a big man. The big man is always the villain in the movie.
Lee, of course, is the founder of the Fight Monkeys, and he's done a very good job there. Founder of the Minneapolis group Fight Monkeys, providing training in armory and performance. A lot to be proud of there. And also, if you want to check out the video, I got some fun stuff of his Facebook profile pictures of recent. So yeah. But we are here to talk Starlog and to also bring in our special guest here. With us is John Mosby, my good buddy here of Highlander Worldwide. And John, welcome again to Blood of Kings here. You've been obviously deep in Highlander for many, many years and other publications as such. Just want to give a highlight here. First of all, you are the public relations at the Highlander Worldwide. You have a long career, over 25 years of doing a lot of written work for titles including Total Film, Starburst, Film Review, Fantasia, of course, Starlog, many, many others. Also, this book here, Fearful Symmetry, The Essential Guide to All Things Highlander. Got to have it if you're a fan here. John, welcome to Fandom Podcast Network. Welcome back. We appreciate you here, man.
It's been so long since I've seen you guys. It's so good to be back.
Way too long.
We just did another podcast prior to this that you should see. We'll touch on that later. So that's an inside joke. Appreciate that. But we're getting into Starlog here. Now, I want to first of all remind people this is not the first one that we've done here on Blood of Kings regarding Starlog. It's kind of a little limited series that we're doing here because Lee and I, of course, given our love of Starlog. But before we do that, let's go ahead and head into Joe's where we can have a proper discussion. All right, guys? All right. This is Blood of Kings, episode 177, Highlander 3 Starlog article review with author John Mosby. Now, John, we have discussed in the past, Lee and I, and Lee, feel free to jump in here if you want, of the importance of this magazine. It was the nerd Bible before the internet, where we got a lot of information about the coming movies, the movies that just happened, even like ads for conventions that we may not have known about. First one came out 50 years ago with Star Trek on the cover. The 7th issue had Star Wars. Remember that movie? Lee, your quick thoughts on Starlog.
Oh, man, this just takes me back to browsing the racks at the magazine store. They used to have right across the street. And then, of course, once Barnes & Noble moved into town, you'd always go there to find the fresh copy. This was, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have the socials. This is how you found out about nerd stuff. This is how you got your actual metal Star Trek communicator pins, all the good stuff. And, it was a lifeline. And I think it helped to lead to the big convention circuits and the larger geek community that we enjoy today.
Yeah. Same here. I remember seeing it on the books, and the covers were just wonderful. They brought you right in. And it was just a great way to learn about stuff that was happening, or you saw your favorite fandom on the cover and you picked it up. And Highlander, of course, was highlighted in several of these issues. We'll get to that in a minute. But the last issue of Starlog was published in 2009 with, as it says here, the Monsters versus Aliens and Fringe and the movie Push. And the stop movie motion picture Caroline. So, yeah, it's weird. That was the actual last one. And then there was a warehouse fire, December 2007 in Illinois, which contained all back issues of Starlog and Fangoria magazines. They were destroyed as back issues of Starlog are not reprinted. The only remaining back issues are now housed in private collections and those available on the secondary market. And then the company itself, bankruptcy, Starlog Publisher Creative Media, also went bankrupt. And we had issues there as well. But so every now and then I come across them at Comic-Con conventions and stuff like that. And, or I go on eBay to pick some up. I picked one up from the Star Wars Holiday Special, little things like that. But John, I want to start with you before we get into your article. You obviously made a living producing and, the wonderful content for a lot of publications. Feel free to let us know where you were at the time when it came to that, but also Starlog itself, because that's an American publication, and I know the UK had its own.
Yeah, I mean, the American, the main Starlog wasn't, I was not going to say wasn't readily available in normal newsagents and stores. We didn't have the big Barnes and Nobles and Borders, which Borders was an institution that came later and has now disappeared again in the UK. But it would be in my exposure was pretty much in comic stores and sometimes in the sort of the bigger newsagents or the bigger stores which had a larger rack of magazines. They would have a certain amount for imports, and Starlog would probably be there. And I didn't pick up every issue, but if there was something in there that I wanted, I could reliably informed it was going to be big. I knew Starlog was the daddy, as it were, of science fiction and genre magazines. It was one.
Was that the case in the UK? Was that in the case in the UK? Like, if you got in Starlog, that was a big deal.
I mean, Starlog was known. People would have heard of Starlog, even if you weren't a reader of it. I think people might have been familiar with it, at least on the outskirts. And those of us who were a bit sort of geekish were more than aware that it was kind of the magazine that a lot of other magazines would try and emulate. And this was a time when there was a lot of emulation. Nowadays it's incredibly hard to launch a magazine, and while there is something tactile about magazines, but nowadays it's a lot cheaper and easier and pragmatic to have something online. So there are very few magazines now that really emulate comparable. A lot of the magazines that survived are more general magazines now, like in the UK, at least Empire and stuff like that.
Those were still, Empire was, speaking of, what were some of the big ones in the UK that were ones that you guys were drawn to reading and also providing content for?
A lot of the visual imagination titles would be like Starburst, TV Zone, were probably the comparable ones. Visual Imagination was the company that produced those, and they also produced Film Review. And they kind of cornered the market for a very long time. Eventually, in similar ways, they went bankrupt. I know they owed me some money when they did. But yeah, there was sadly that's the story of lots of magazines. I used to edit Impact magazine. Same thing. It became no longer viable to produce something that cost a lot of money to print and distribute when you could essentially do it for free online. At least that was the pragmatic line. But Starlog was always one of those magazines of the imports that you would recognize, that sometimes might just turn up randomly on a newsagent's shelf, but would be there as well.
I have a question about that because, especially in the 90s, we started seeing a lot of the import magazines from the UK and stuff like that.
Mm.
But they were always, sometimes they were put in like a special bag, you know, and they were obviously like twice as expensive because they came from overseas. So like your Starlog, you know, might have been like, maybe, what was it? What is the cover price on this one? This one says $4.95 in the US, $6.25 in Canada, where like something like Empire or whatever, if it was here in the States. Lee, do you remember this? It would be like maybe $10. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, like I always kind of wondered, like, did they have the page 3 girl? Is that why they had to be put in the bag?
I don't think so. But no, but you're right.
I understand that joke, Lee.
Yeah. Well, it might not even be a joke. Like for those of you out there, there's a bunch of British newspapers and just kind of tabloids on page 3. They'd always have some topless girl, and they're the page 3 girls.
Yeah. I bought them for the news items, I can assure you. It was, but you were right, absolutely, on the price. Imports at that, it was that weird situation where there were imports coming in, but they were hugely expensive. I mean, that's always been a problem. If I'm now, I'm in Iowa now, you know, and if I went to the Barnes and Noble in, say, Sioux Falls, and there was a British magazine, it would be twice the price that I would pay for it in the UK. But that was probably a shock to people like me at the time, at my age, and whatever, with not a huge disposable income, that imports would be more expensive if they were on random shelves of a newsagent. They even at the time, 20 years, you could be paying well over £10 for something like that in the UK, where it was only $3.95 or something in the US. Comic stores started to thread the needle. They would be cheaper than the random big chains, but they would still be pricey. And that there has to be something. It had to be well presented. And Starlog was the import that people would gravitate to see what was in it that month.
Well, speaking of, let's go ahead and get into the actual issue we're going to discuss. All right, so here we are. This is Blood of Kings, episode 177, discussing Highlander 3 article in the Platinum Edition of Starlog here. And I got the cover here on the video, and I got the actual issue here with me here. And you'll notice it's all Star Trek on the cover here, and there's a reason why. We'll get into that. But what I want to do for the listeners and for the viewers here is I want to take you back in time, okay? What I want to do is let's go back to 1994. There you go. 1994, 95. And so this was the Platinum Edition. We were talking before we started recording that Starlog released these special issues outside of the regular monthly issues, kind of like the annuals for comics and stuff like this. And this was the Starlog Platinum Edition, volume number 5. January 1995 is when the date was on here, but I think it probably released maybe in late 94. Mm-hmm. And Star Trek was big deal at this time, and we'll get into that. We'll showcase here a slideshow. What we're going to do is, before we get into John's article, we're going to take you back in time what was showcased in this actual issue. So here we go. We got the cover here and the inside. What do you call that? The inside cover that is like that splash page. Is that what that is?
Like the contents page, yeah.
Yeah, the contents page. Yeah, there you go. So we got that showing on there, and you see more Star Trek there. And then we got like a letter from the article or from the editor here. And then it looks like someone was lucky enough here. And Lee, you'll find this one interesting because this is actually a picture in the upper right-hand corner of George Lucas in and around the Mall of America, and he goes into, and he's with his daughter, and they actually go in to this bookstore, and he bought a Starlog Star Wars technical journal. And then we also have an article there with Chekhov from Star Trek, Chekhov choices with Clinic. You're starting to see a little tie-in here. We had an X-Files article. X-Files was blowing up here, guys, so you had to have X-Files. We also had the movie Ed Wood, came out in 1984. There, Tim Burton, of course, directing, with Johnny being Ed himself. And then we start getting into other Star Trek articles and interviews here. We have this one called Star Trek George Takei Sulu article called Sulu's Secrets. And also there's an audiobook here, the Cacophony audiobook, which I actually have, that Star Trek Cacophony audiobook there. Next we have more Star Trek here, guys. We have Leonard Nimoy article, his involvement with Techno Comics and the Premortal series. I did not read this. I was not familiar with it. But it was something that apparently Spock himself, Nimoy, was a huge comic book fan, and he got involved with his own input, I guess his own series. Then we have Captain's Finale, because keep in mind, guys, this is Star Trek Generations time. And of course, whether I was not a fan of this, but they killed off Captain Kirk. Spoiler alert in Generations. There's an article, an interview with William Shatner there, but we're not done. Time travel, Time Cop article with interview director Peter Hyams, one of my favorite guilty pleasure time travel movies here. We also covered it on the Fandom Podcast Network for Couch Potato Theater. Any thoughts on these articles thus far that jump out to you guys?
It's a whole time capsule, isn't it? It's I mean, some of the stuff like you look at Babylon 5 there, huge fan of that. But yeah, it's amazing what was coming out. You think, oh my God, that was over 30 years ago. I'm old.
Yeah, 1995, 30 years ago. Yeah, we went through a good time with a lot of movies. But yeah, the last article I'm showcasing here is the Babylon 5 article, who interviewed with Peter Jurassic, of course, who played Londo from Battle of Five. But let's get into the reason why we're here, John. Let's talk about your article here. And before and I'm going to read some excerpts from it. But before we do that, I want to get where you were at this time and how you were approached to do this article. And you actually traveled for it. So give us some little background with that.
Yeah, I was, like most people, continue to be a struggling journalist. People tend to think that, just because you're covering film and television, it's always glamorous. It's certainly, not necessarily lucrative. It's great fun. And I had a lot of great times when I was doing it a lot of the time. Less so at the moment. But Starlog came out. They didn't approach me. I approached them. I was not being so. I got the opportunity as a sort of long-term Highlander fan. I would have various sort of feelers out for when things were happening, and I knew they were going to be filming up in near Fort Worth. So I thought, they're filming in Scotland, they're filming in the UK. I'm going to have to try. And I believe that it was Susie Tullett, who's was a publicist, one of the veteran publicists who I know well now. And I put feelers out, and it was like, okay, they're shooting up, I say near Fort William, in a place called Bannerby, just outside it. And so, yeah, I jumped on a train. It was like, okay, you can come up. They haven't got a lot of time, but you can come up for a day. Effectively, it was. I think I stayed overnight, but effectively, I got a day on set, and yeah, it was great. I mean, it was anybody who's ever been on a film set will tell you that it's a mixture of, oh my God, this is brilliant, and incredibly slow and mundane. But I've always enjoyed sort of watching stuff being done. So yeah, I went on the set, and essentially I sold the article afterwards to I got quite a lot of material. So about 4 or 5 publications I did stuff for, trying not to duplicate stuff, which I wasn't very good at the time. Some stuff got duplicated, but yeah, so that was it. They didn't approach me. I approached them, wondering whether the great Starlog would be interested, knowing that that Highlander was a known commodity, and chances are they weren't going to pay for somebody to come all the way from America to go on set. They might do some stuff when the publicity machine geared up in the US. But hey, a set visit is always an interesting angle to go, and I always loved where possible to go on the set, because you get the feel of whatever's going to be. You get people being a bit more candid in the moment, rather than sometimes the kind of generic press releases, which are always, this film is absolutely brilliant, etc. Which is fine, it's great, but it doesn't really your flavor. Yeah, it's very generic. So to get actual feel of something and actually be on a film set, you get that feeling. And sometimes, I think we've said before, you can be on a set of a film and think it's great, and it's not that great in the end when it's released, and vice versa. But there's nothing like, I think, watching something being created. and I'd been very lucky. But this was I say back in the early 90s, so I was at the start of my career, as it were, and this was a biggie. This was probably the biggest set I'd been on at that point, and it's fantastic stuff.
So I want to go back to 1994-95 here. We all remember Highlander 2 being disappointed, the majority of us, and of course now I have a certain nostalgia for it. But this was supposed to be the movie that fixed it. This one is supposed to be a direct sequel. We'll touch on that in a minute here. And Lee, I want to go to you with this because, we've talked about Highlander 2, and but we were at this time. I wasn't feeling Highlander 2 at this time. I was mad at it. And we've come around on it for reasons, but we wanted it to be fixed, Lee. And this movie coming out was supposed to change that. Maybe it did. We'll discuss that. But your thoughts on that?
I feel like they didn't get it. They really just remade the first one. I think that they, tried to, make it extreme, XTRE without the E, because that's more extreme. But there wasn't anything that they did that fixed anything. They just kind of went with what sort of worked in the first one, even though it wasn't a success over here. There's some really great stuff, but I think the intro was not great. Like, oh, it's just Connor sitting in a chair and a flashback to a scene that he wasn't at. But
yeah,
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. As I've said in previous podcasts, I saw Highlander 2 first, so I didn't hate it as much as somebody that would have seen Highlander 1 first. I'm like, oh wow, this is fun. Like, hey, that guy is sword fighting on a hoverboard. How is this not the best movie ever? Oh, they killed him with a train? Cool.
Yeah.
But I didn't know how much better it could be. And then I saw Highlander 1 and then the series. And so when this was coming out, I was in the middle of, season 2 where they were really ramping up, getting good. Or I guess this would have been season 3 when this came out.
Yeah.
So like really, good stuff. So, okay, I got some hope for the Highlander franchise. And this is like as good as an episode, like mid-season, a mid-season Highlander the series episode.
That's a good point. Now, John, I want to ask you, because at this time I was just like, they're going to fix Highlander. This is great, And I rewatched this movie last night. I enjoyed myself, but I, like Lee said, they kind of did, one again with a couple little different things here and there. I still found it fun and entertaining. I have a couple little issues with it. How did Kane learn how to drive a car right away? I know, just little things like that. But I want to ask you, as a journalist and being a fan of Highlander, and I know that you have to kind of toe the line of showing your true emotions, but what were you feeling just as a fan at the time?
It's always interesting. I mean, PR and films obviously want you to go to the set and say nice thing, and do something, and they're not going to say, hey, if this guy's going to trash our movie, we're going to let him come and do it. They want you to say nice things. But I've been very lucky over the years that very few times people have laid down guardrails about what you can say and what you can't say. And I've always tried to read between. If I've been involved in something with a film and I think, oh my God, this is awful, I think you can probably read between the lines of what I've written when I may not have said that, but that's that's the feeling. There was very, at least nailed it. I think that the feeling of the movie for me when I was watching it was they're doing a course correction. This is what works for the original. Let's try and duplicate that rather than necessarily extend it. And the result was fine. It was okay. It wasn't a fantastically wonderful movie, but it did feel like a bigger budget version of a mid-season of the TV series, which
That's a good point. You guys nailed
that. It's like an episode that doesn't try and reinvent things. It just it goes for the beats. There was a lot of great things in the series, which I think would have been great movies if they'd gone a different way. But Highlander 3 was a course correction. I think it was. I mean, Christopher Lambert was very honest on the set, as is mentioned in the article. That the only reason he did Highlander 2 is because he was contractually obliged to it, the same as Sean Connery. And the only way they got him back here, well, I was going to say the only way they got him back was to do a better story. I'm sure it had something to do with money, and business as well. But I think the idea was that he had a bit more input this time, and that they wanted it to feel like, hey, we're doing a course correction because we realize this is a really good idea and theme and remit. Let's try and get back, because Highlander 2 clearly didn't work. So I think unapologetically, they, from the very start, even people on the set were saying, we're trying to go back to basics. And
was the fan in you excited about that, or were you optimistic? Yeah.
I mean, yes, I've always been a Highlander fan, and for some reason, it was just, as I say, it suddenly appeared on the radar. Oh my God, they're going to be shooting, in Scotland. So I went after it to say, look, I'd like to do this. I do know a little bit of what I'm talking about. I know I'm a fairly fresh-faced journalist, but I'd already done I hadn't done any set visit, but I'd interviewed Christophe Lambert for it at an event. So I could say, look, here's Highlander 2, not the guest film. Here's a pretty good article about it. And so I think they were fairly reassured that I knew what I was talking about, and that I would be honest, but not brutally, somebody that they could say, hey, we got somebody on the set. And I promised them, that various magazines would be running this, which is, several birds with one stone. So it was fun to do. It was fun to be there. And, it's like anytime you're sitting behind the camera watching somebody do stuff, if you're not getting some buzz out of that, then you're in the wrong profession.
Lee, did you have something you want to say?
Yeah, I was actually going to go back just one point. I think that Deborah Unger is a more compelling romantic lead than Roxanne Hart was. I think that was the one thing that they really upped the game on. I think she was, and a far more interesting character.
Yeah, she was good. I actually was enjoying her character. And man, I'm just going to say this because I know we've talked about Lee, probably one of the steamiest, sexy scenes in Highlander. I'm just saying.
Oh, yeah.
She was lovely. Yeah. She was lovely. She was there on set. Just to clarify as well, the main day and stuff I was doing was the scenes at his own the old forge where he's trying to remake the sword.
Oh, cool.
So Deborah Unger was around at that point. Deborah Unger was great. This was before she did other stuff like Crash and a lot of movies where she became more prominent later, which is quite often what happens with some of the Highlander performers.
She was in Payback too as well, right, Lee? The podcast we did,
She was lovely. Yeah, very down to earth. You get some people, you do meet people who are a bit standoffish, and I'm the big I am, I'm the next Meryl Streep, etc. She wasn't. She was very down to earth. I think she was very pragmatic. But when you're walking around a Scottish field, and I think I said this in the article, it's like having 5 seasons in an hour. We literally had hail go through at one point.
All three of us having been to Scotland, we understand that.
Yeah.
And then you got the midges you got to worry about too.
Yeah. So you've got to be, being on set wasn't particularly glamorous, but I think she was like, oh, we're all mucking in kind of thing, and that's just the right attitude that you actually want when you're doing something like that, I think.
Well, it's funny you bring that up because what we're going to do here is I'm going to read a couple passages from your article here. And of course, this is from the volume number 5 Starlog Magazine Platinum Edition, which was heavy on Star Trek because, Generations was coming out and there was a lot of trekking going on. So, but let's get into the article here. And if you're watching the YouTube channel, we got some video and screenshots here. So you paint a good picture of where we are here regarding Highlander fandom. And you said Highlander was one of the films that didn't get the box office, that didn't set the box office alight, but smoldered and flickered and refused to be put out. A, quote, word-of-mouth movie, which spawned a cult following. Eventually, it gave birth to quite inferior sequel, as well as an ongoing live-action and animated series. It's now the tail end of 1994 and the time for the saga's 3rd installment, Highlander 3: The Sorcerer, which takes the audience right back to the basics, but it hasn't been the easiest of roads getting there in more ways than one. On a cold and blistery day in March, everyone is up to their ankles in mud. Those not wearing boots have given up trying to walk across the scattered planks and stones and now wade through the swamp that was once a field. Was this you with the improper footwear there, John?
I thought I'd been quite sensible with the shoes I was wearing. I mean, when you're literally sort of like that done in mud, I don't think there's any suitable wear. I mean, it's certainly I needed a new pair of shoes afterwards. I think it was because it rained and sleeted and everything. The weather, boom, it turned the field within minutes into just a swamp. It was awful in that regard.
Well, it reminds me of you talking in the Fearful Symmetry about bringing Adrian's cape back to the costume rental when they did those, shots in Scotland, like how it was like the most damage they'd ever seen done to a piece of wardrobe.
Scotland is beautiful, but it's a bit like going to Everest. You don't just go there and wear fashionable clothing. You've got to go realizing the kind of environment. And Scotland is famous, particularly once you get to the Highlands, as you guys know, for having inclement weather, which means it can be sunny one minute and rain in the next.
Be prepared for all weather. Pack accordingly when you go to Scotland. So yeah,
I went in 2003 with a buddy of mine, and he went with a pea coat in January.
Oh geez.
I'm like, hey bud, you're gonna need a better coat than that. And he's like, I'm from Cleveland. We have cold weather. And we get off the plane, and every picture I have of this dude, like I'm cold. This dude is freezing. His shoulders are up here, like he's trying to smile, like, but it's just absolutely like.
I still have a coat.
Cold.
I still have like a coat jacket that I bought in Fort William because it's been so resilient. I wear it all, every winter and stuff. In fact,
my wife has a pair. My wife has a pair of pants that she bought there in Fort William, and she bought them because we were expecting rain, and then she put them on, and then we didn't get any rain. It was very funny. So you set the tone here about the weather, of course, and you mentioned, of course, weather is all part of the stunning landscape. What better place to chat with the star of Highlander himself? Here to the film, one of the movie's turning points? ? Lambert points to a nearby Land Rover shelter. It'll be another 20 minutes before filming can resume. What are you going through at this time when you're like getting ready to talk to Christoph here?
I mean, I'd interviewed a few people by that point, and I'd never been that kind of. Very rarely do I ever get kind of starstruck. But there is something that I've always liked when people are on set and passionate about a project. You kind of get along with that as well. And he was one of the guys that he was really glad to be back. I mean, I know there's been ups and downs with the Highlander franchise, but he genuinely enjoyed it. It was a hard day's work. He wasn't there just for the fun of it. But he wasn't just talking to me because he had to. I'm sure there's an element, you get press coming to the set. But he wanted to talk about it, and he kind of wanted to reassure people that this wasn't going to be Highlander 2. So when somebody says, let's just head to that, Land Rover, and we'll just sit in the Land Rover and chat, it suddenly doesn't feel like an interview. You're not at a big press conference. You're not sat at a big table. But you're actually sat with somebody, an actor in, like one of your mates. You're not, you've never met this person before in your life, and you probably won't see them, more than a handful of times again. But there's that kind of intimacy is the wrong word, but it feels like you're chatting more informally with somebody when it's raining outside. And and that makes
and I'm sure
more
he feels comfortable that way as well. So a
few times that's happened where I've been on sets where it's the conditions haven't been great, and somebody said, let's just go into that little cafe or whatever. There was without name dropping, I went on the set of a film called Brassed Off, which had Ewan McGregor in it, and Pete Postlethwaite, and I ended up playing a game of pool with them in the local pub because that's where we decided to do the interview. It was and that's a story, that's a story, but it felt so informal. It felt like just having a drink with people, and when you can get that feeling, I mean, I've been incredibly lucky. There's about 3 or 4 times where I can tell stories where people go, no, I'm going, that's this was great because it's just informal, and that's the best way to do an interview.
What was the movie with those two?
With Pete Postlethwaite and Ewan McGregor, a film called Brassed Off. It was about the coal mines closing in Yorkshire, and
I remember that.
It's a bittersweet comedy. I can't recommend it enough. Pete, I interviewed many times throughout his career. Lovely bloke. And Ewan McGregor, this was before he was doing Star Wars. So I've said I played pool with Obi-Wan Kenobi, and he cheated. He used the Force.
So you
But
claim
no,
it's
but
rented.
yeah, I've there's 3 or 4 times in my life where it's been pinch me. You know, it's just like these are the times where I've been so lucky, and fortunately, I've known at the time how lucky I am. Some people sort of look back and go, "Oh, I didn't know how." You know, no, I'm always kind of aware how lucky I've been, and the times when I've managed to hang out with people in more informal settings, or because of the weather, or just because the way things work out. I've been on pub crawls with people, and you know, it's just great. It's you know, it's wonderful when you get that kind of the lack of formality, and actors don't often do that because actors have a very cynical and probably quite right idea that a lot of journalists are going to screw up what they say, and you know, so they don't trust, right, you know, people just who they're only going to meet for an hour or so. But sometimes you just make that connection where you can sit down and people just go, "Oh, okay," and they might say, "Oh, well, this bit's off the record," and they'll joke about something. But you know, if you can get somebody in an informal setting, it's much more fun to get the stories that they have to tell.
So one of the topics I want to touch on in a little bit is this connection to Guns N' Roses and what happened there. But before we get to that, you touched on earlier. You quoted him here in the article. He says, "When I did Highlander 2, explains, I had no choice. I was signing to do 1 and 2, and I had no say, no script approval. When I saw the second film, I was pretty disappointed. Not with the visual stuff, because it was very spectacular, but because it had no story. I knew that while I was filming it, which was pretty painful, but I didn't have a choice. So when they approached me for Highlander 3, I told them I wasn't against it, but I wanted script approval, director approval, and every approval possible. The main thing was to go back to number 1. Number 3 is a direct sequel to number 1, and the sequel number 2 should have been. I'm not saying that to sell this movie. It's the truth. When I publicizing, it says, when I was publicizing Highlander 2, I told the truth. If you were looking for a film similar to the original, you won't be getting it. This one seems to be working much better. We spent some 30 hours on the phone," recalls Paul All, who worked on the on-screen play. Lambert is very intense and generous since he's the one who has been carrying Highlander for the past 10 years. He's an effectively responsibility to the screenplay, also exercises a moral right over the character's evolution. The first 2 films are directed by Russell Mulcahy, whose background was, of course, steeped in music videos, and Andy Moran, Andy Moran, is the director of Highlander 3. He directed the famous Guns N' Roses video, November Rain. We'll get back to that in a minute. But when you were talking to him about his, I guess, this control that he had here, how is he dealing with that, do you think?
I mean, people get, I mean, nowadays it's not unusual to see people on TV shows and films having executive producer credit. And that's often a way for them, sometimes pragmatically, to have some sort of control. Sometimes it's just an added bonus. But I think there is some truth when you had a franchise which was built around one character. Yes, I'm sure somebody somewhere will have had a conversation saying, "Hey, you know, can we do it with other actors and stuff?" Yeah, because pragmatically, things nowadays, you know, get recast all the time. But Christoph was the face of Highlander, certainly at that time, and I think he was invested in it. I'm sure. I mean, I'm not naive. I'm sure that, you know, there was financial and stuff, you know, stuff that goes on, and everybody was happy with that side of it. But I do think, honestly, from the way he was talking on set at the time, that somebody had to come up with a really good deal in all departments for him to come back, because everybody had kind of ridiculed the second movie. It didn't fit. I mean, there are things to like in the second movie, but it didn't feel like Highlander. And I think the idea, everybody wanted to do something that had the success of Highlander, and therefore was returning to basics, like we've said. So I think he was almost the face of it that could turn around and say, "Hey, you know, I want to do this," and it would carry more weight than a lot of other people. I'm not saying it would always be, you know, the actor doesn't necessarily have always the most power. Even there's probably only a handful of actors today that wield that kind of power. But you know, if you can say, "I'm not returning unless we do this," then, you know, you have to do something completely different if that actor isn't willing to come back. So it's easier to say, yeah, let's all work together. And he was somebody who was, and is very creative. Jimmy Daly, who also worked on this, Christoph got on really well with him, and they went off to do a film called When Saturday Comes, which Christoph did a small part in, but he acted as executive producer on that. That was a football movie with Sean Bean and Pete Postlethwaite again. And that was the type of person that Christoph definitely is. I think he's very collaborative in that sense. If he likes what he's doing, he wants good people around him. And he has a certain amount of influence, and therefore, you pedal on that currency a little bit and say, yeah, this is what I want to do, and hopefully people will listen.
Cool. That's great. So let's get into Guns N' Roses here, guys. So I found this fascinating, and this is one of the what could have beens when it comes to Highlander. And we know Highlander loves its rock music, and also, if you can, let's get some of the rock musicians to play parts like they did in the TV series. Lee and I did a fun podcast on Bloody Kings talking about all of the rock stars and the actors who were in these movies that were also musicians themselves. But Guns N' Roses fascinates me here because not only am I a fan of Guns N' Roses, but we also do a hair metal podcast here on the Fandom Podcast Network. And Guns N' Roses during this time was the biggest band in the world. They were touring for like 3 years nonstop. They were promoting their second albums, Use Your Illusion 1 and 2. Their videos were very high production, and the director Andy directed probably one of the biggest ones, which is November Rain. And you go on to say here in the article, and what about that reported less than happy confrontation between Lambert and Guns N' Roses front man Axl Rose? Quote, what was written in the press was crap, he says. That stuff that said we did not get along was totally made up, because at that point I hadn't even met Axl. We're still talking about the group's involvement, but like any big rock group, like Queen for the first film, they want to see a rough cut, and then we can decide whether there'll be 1 or 2 songs for the entire album. They're not out of the race. And so I did a little research on this here. And so Axl Rose was considered to provide the soundtrack for the movie. The Final Dimension, of course, was what was renamed here in the States, but otherwise known as Highlander 3, of course, or The Sorcerer. But the deal fell through because Rose refused to participate if actor Mario Van Peebles remained in the cast, reportedly. Director Andy Moran, who had previously directed music videos for Guns N' Roses, wanted the band to create a soundtrack for the third installment, mimicking, of course, the impact Queen had in the original film. According to Moran, Guns N' Roses was initially excited about the project. However, Axl Rose allegedly took a strong dislike to Mario Van Peebles, who played the main villain, Kane. Rose agreed to do the soundtrack if he was not replaced, but the production team apparently refused to drop Van Peebles, resulting in the partnership falling through. I want to get your thoughts on this, John. I know you know who Guns N' Roses was. This was kind of a big deal, but I don't remember this at the time. This didn't come out till later, as far as I remember. Give me some insight on that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of speculation. I don't have an inside line as to what's exactly true. Various people said variations largely on what you said. I did hear that there was some friction between Mario Van Peebles and Axl Rose. I can't speak to the validity of those rumors because I haven't spoken to either of them personally. That's certainly, if I got either of them in a room, I would probably try and find a tactful way to ask that. But I know that one of the ways of emulating the first film was that they knew, everybody knew that the music was important. And you need, if you're not going to do Queen again or not have the same involvement of Queen, you had to have a band with a signature sound. It couldn't just be a generic thing. It had to be a band where you hear like a chord and you go, oh, that's Queen, that's Guns N' Roses, that's, whoever. So if Guns N' Roses were in the running as much as potentially various people were saying, it could have worked out fantastically well. It really could have done, because anybody of my era, you didn't even have to be a massive fan of Guns N' Roses. Most people were, but you knew the sound. It's like you don't have to be Queen's biggest fan to see to feel the association with Highlander. So certainly the idea of having Guns N' Roses do the theme could have worked fantastically well. I can see on paper that worked fantastically well.
Yeah.
But with Queen, of course, as we've said before, it was they were heavily involved in writing the music after they'd seen the cut, and there's a lot of different timetables and different agendas working in a movie. It's all well and good saying we're not going to write the music until we've seen the film, but some films don't cut until a couple of months before release, and you can't say, hey, write me a rock album in 2 months, that's going to be a classic. So I can see how, it's like, I'd like to do it, but I need to see this. And it's like, we like you to do it, but we need to do that. Don't always mix. It happens a lot of times in the industry where timing doesn't work out.
Well, there's a reason why Mario Van Peebles is in this film, and Leo, I want to get your thoughts on this, because one of my favorite guilty pleasure action movies from the 90s is Gunman, which of course started Christopher Lambert and Mario Van Peebles, and surprisingly good chemistry in that film. And there's a small Star Trek tie in there because Patrick Stewart has a small role in that film as well, as one of one of the villains that they have to deal with in the beginning. But Lee, you remember that movie?
Yeah, we actually had it at my theater. So when I was working at the movie theaters in high school, we had that. My two theories on why Van Peebles and Axel didn't like each other. Axel never forgave him for Jaws 4. That movie's just terrible. And the other is they were trying to do a crossover between Sweet Child of Mine and Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song, and they were never able to make it happen, and Axel just took it personally.
Well, speaking of Mario, I like that. That's probably what it was. John, I want to ask you, you talk to Mario, it looks like, in this, and he says, "This is a wonderful role," says Van Peebles. "We've made Cain an immortal originally from Egypt, who has come up through the Genghis Khan era." And I love that he says he's the Jim Jones of immortals, which is, of course, the call out to Jim Jones of Guyana, and they drink the Kool-Aid and all that unfortunate business. Then your thoughts on Mario during this interview process?
Yeah, I didn't speak directly to him face to face, but it is a really good quote again. It's I've always thought, and if you ask any actor that plays the villain in inverted commas, rabbit ears in inverted commas, most people will say that as a performance they never play it as the villain, and that you've got to be, the most actors who are playing villains have to approach it as if really they're the hero and they're just completely misunderstood. And that's a really great way, I think, a method way of approaching it. I think I'm not sure Mario Van Peebles had that particular idea. I think he relished just playing a kind of villain, the same way that some actors just they can eat the scenery in a delicious way. And I don't think he felt for this film it was, oh, I'm completely misunderstood and I'm naturally the hero. I think he understood the mission, which was, I'm going to be, a larger than life. They wanted some. I think the notes would have been earlier on. We want to have something that's like, not quite. And I think he probably read that and went, "Yep, I got this," and went for it that way. So I don't think he saw Cain as a kind of any misunderstood, hero of the piece. I think he was gonna, no, I'm just the bad guy here. I'm just, I'm here to chop off heads and have a good time.
Gotcha. A couple more things I just want to topic on is Deborah Unger again here. And he says here in the article that Lambert was also instrumental in casting Unger after she became the first Canadian actress to graduate from the Australian National Institute of Dramatic Art, an establishment whose other alumni includes Mel Gibson and Judy Davis. And I found this fascinating because I was trying to find this movie last year because we do a show on the network called Time Warp where we discuss an entire year of movies, and it's monthly. And this movie came out that she co-starred in called Prisoners of the Sun with Star Trek actor George Takei. It's a World War II era where George Takei, I believe, plays a Japanese leader with a prisoner of war camp. And I was trying to find this movie and I couldn't find it on physical media or streaming anywhere. But she had done a lot of acting in and throughout there. What regarding Unger, what did you learn during the interview process with her?
She was lovely. This was at the start. This was pre-Crash, and it was which was something which was a very controversial film for people who remember that. But I think she saw this not so much as a big break because she was already working in the industry, but one of the kind of things, and I don't mean this in any derogatory way because it's very pragmatic, that I think people coming up through the industry try and pick a handful of quite diverse projects, and this was, you find a lot of actors, very serious actors, sometimes do a horror movie, just because I think they like flexing different muscles, and I think what appealed to her was, at least on the page and somewhat in the film itself, the ability to play two characters in this one. And that's always appealing. You ask any actor, that stretches a few muscles. It's, you either have a character that you want to play or a variety of characters. And in certain films, people get to play more than one character.
Maybe it's just me, and Lee, I want to ask you, her character as the scientist was a lot higher than the flashback version that we got with Connor. I'm just saying.
Yeah. I don't think we get much in the flashback to hang on. We didn't get Heather. We got a great Brenda, but we didn't really get a Heather.
No, and I think it's probably worked better on the page than eventually it did on the screen. But I think that was one of the attractions for her generally, is how differently can I play these two characters? And in the end, I don't think there was probably quite that as much much meat on the bone for the period part of that. But I can see why she was attracted to the role, and I think she does perfectly well in it. But I think that was probably the attraction. Hey, you get to play two, supposedly at this point, very different characters. And I think that probably excited her as I saw it as a real possibility. Again, I don't think the result was quite as good as perhaps everybody intended, but it's still it was still a solid, as you say, a new episode of the series. That people would say you can feel that a bit more money's been spent on this film, but a lot of it was practical stuff. It wasn't so flashy that like a lot of modern films would be. They actually spent the money on doing stuff in Scotland on a lot of the production designs and stuff. I thought worked pretty well at the time, I have to admit.
Well, as we wrap things up here, the end of the article says the TV series, which also stars Adrian Paul, has its own continuity. As fans know, Lambert even guest starred in its first episode. But now, with 3 films behind him, Lambert is philosophical about the possibility of Highlander 4. Quote, "We're not talking about it anymore, but hey, they said there'd never be no more diehards, no more Indiana Jones, and they're being done. If I can have the same amount of participation, then maybe." Christopher Lambert says, quote, "It's different from, say, a Rambo movie. It's more than just action. There has to be the love side, historical side, a great story. It could happen, but let's see. I don't want a spectacular looking film with no story." He smiles. That was Highlander 2. So as we wrap things up here, John, I just want to get your final thoughts on where you thought Christoph was at this time. Do you think that he was happy with this production? I mean, did you feel like this kind of fixes things a little bit, and plus he was more involved?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was probably one of the attractions for him doing it, because he wasn't contractually obliged to do that anymore. So I think he was interested in having flexing a little bit more of creative control. The film eventually did okay. It was okay. It was a perfectly decent film. As a course correction, I think it was good. It didn't make a huge impact. The script, there's a point that one of my colleagues said. I remember saying at the time when we actually there's a point where he has Connor has an adoptive son, and there's a phone call, and it goes, "Hi, Dad, this is John, your son." Yeah, because he could, if somebody calls you up and goes, "Oh yeah, just to remind you," and so the script, I think, wasn't necessarily the primary thing, but as an actual story, it was fine. As a kind of more epic part of the TV series, it would have been absolutely fine. I think it was a step. I think, again, course correction is the word I keep coming back to, but it
Right.
felt like, what can we do to course correct and then hopefully keep it alive? The series was doing really well at this time, and probably better than people might have initially suspected, that the TV series might overshadow the films a little bit, which I think it did. But I think it was a very interesting time for Highlander. This was one of the things that kept it alive as a possible feature franchise, and it didn't do any harm to to help the TV series and keep interesting going on that. So it was a time when there was a lot of things going on, and not everything worked out perfectly. But I think it was an interesting time to be a Highlander fan, because there was quite a little bit out there that kept the home fires burning, as it were. And in some ways, we were very lucky at that time, because after that, feature film wise, didn't work out that well. The series would go on for quite a long time, and that was going to be the flagship. But I think it was an important time for Highlander and Highlander fans to look back on as, it kept the flag flying.
Gotcha. Lee, you got anything more before you get things going?
I was going to say, in reading this, I really do like the prose. The way that you started it off, you've got very good imagery. The way you move from section to section is very nice. And you threw in just enough little stuff that we knew that you were a proper fan. I mean, ending the first paragraph with "It's a kind of magic." I mean, nice touch. Not even a wink. So you know that, like, if somebody understands what you're saying, they understand. But like, you don't have to lean into the joke like Jay Leno.
No, I try and do that. I try, if I genuinely like something, I think it shows in what I've written. I like to try and create mood, if I can. Like, so to kind of open up the article and say, hey, you're sitting on a couch or in a comic shop reading this at the moment, and I'm on the side of a bloody mountain getting freezing parts of my anatomy off. There's a bit of, I think, if you can if you have the opportunity to do an interview in an interesting place, bring the place in. Nobody's interested in the interviewer particularly. I think the only mistake I've ever seen people do is when they put themselves in the piece to the detriment of the person they're supposed to be interviewing. It's nothing about me, but if I can help set the scene of saying, okay, I'm on the side of a mountain at this point, then at least people get the kind of texture, and they can always not feel like they're there, but give an idea of what it is. Because most interviews are in hotel suites and things like that. So if you are actually lucky enough to go on set, if you are lucky enough to hang out with some people for a while, share some of that excitement if you can. And I think I always try to do that.
That's a great point, John.
Yeah, well, I think also, if any of our people out there are under, Gen X or millennial, reading this article, I think will show you what journalism used to look like before it became listicles. This is, we can feel your personality, but you didn't make it about you, which I think is missing from a lot of articles. Everyone's talking about like, oh, my experience getting here, and I asked 3 questions that are the same as everybody else. You really let people talk. And we still feel like this is John Mosby doing the interview, but we also feel like we're experiencing it. And so that's the mark of some very good journalism, sir.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I mean, that's one of the things that when I used to do when I did the Highlander Worldwide conventions, the physical conventions, the trick is if you are interviewing somebody on a stage, set it up, you kind of steer it a little bit, but the people are there to listen to your guest. And that's what I've always tried to do in interviews. I insert myself a little bit, but only a little bit. I used to get very annoyed when people, there's just a small number of writers over the years where it was always about the writers, and it's just like, no, nobody's interested in you. You might be a decent person, but nobody's picking up this magazine to talk about John Mosby's experiences doing this. It's who you're interviewing.
I hate to tell you, John, but you are a personality that we want to know more about. So I'm just saying.
But it's because he was so good at the writing. So
yeah,
I enjoy it. Nowadays, there's not always the less magazines than there are lots of people and stuff online, and online doesn't always have the same standards. Sometimes less fact checking. It's who's got it first. Mm-hmm. So I mourn like the magazine to an extent.
Yeah,
good stuff there. Well, guys, let's go ahead and wrap things up here. I want to thank our special guest here, John Mosby. John, thank you so much for coming on. Of course, if you're a Highlander fan, please pick up Fearful Cemetery, the essential guide to all things Highlander. It is still on Amazon to order, so make sure you do that. Give them support there. John, tell people how we can reach out to you and what else you're working on.
Excuse me. I'm basically on Facebook at the moment. I'm not on X or Twitter, or what you want to call it. I'm on Blue Sky. There goes the day. And right now, at the moment, I'm writing-wise not as much as usual, but I'm working on a reference book on John Hurt and possibly another one on Pete Postlethwaite, both brilliant actors. Like a lot of people, I have a novel in my drawer that I've really got to spend work on as well. So there's lots of kind of things at the moment. I'm hoping later on in the year there'll be some other things. Hopefully the Optimum Pitch podcast will continue. We haven't managed to do that much over the last 6-7 months.
You got a home here on the Fandom Podcast Network for that. So
absolutely, yeah, and hopefully some stuff coming up for that. So yeah, definitely. I'm kept busy and out of trouble as much as possible.
Well, if you want more, John, here, previous episode, make sure you go back and check out. We had a great live episode, but it is on YouTube and also the audio podcast where we talked about the Highlander reboot. The first images and on-set pictures with Henry Cavill. We had a great guest there, of course, with John, our good friend Dan Hadley from the Type 40 podcast, and of course from Highlander Heart, Grant Kempster himself. Make sure you guys check that out. Lee, how can we reach out to you, and what's going on with your Fight Monkeys?
We're constantly working on different projects. We've got a few in the can that are going to be opening in a film festival here in about 2 months. There's some drama with the festival, changed hands a few times, and now we've got a new home. Got hopefully a premiere this summer for one that I did an extreme amount of work on, both myself and most of the Fight Monkeys. A lot of sweaty days in heavy costumes in the woods playing bad guys, but you know, it's a crazy life, a lot of fun. Otherwise, everybody out there, if you have local theater or independent film communities, go and support them. Yes. They are the next wave of your favorite actors, and you don't know who they are until they make it.
Well said, sir. Well, I want to thank everyone. First of all, if you're listening to this podcast, please check out the Fandom Podcast Network YouTube page. That's where you can find these Blood of King podcast, the video version. Please subscribe, share it out. Appreciate that. Or Fandom Podcast Network is on Facebook, also on X or Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky now. My name is Kevin. You can find me at Spartan_Phoenix on all the socials, and of course, all the Fandom Podcast Network as well. If you're a fan of the original Highlander collectible card game and anything gaming regarding Highlander, check out our sister page, the Bloody Kings Facebook group there for all collectible card games. Give us a shout out on TeePublic. I'm rocking my Bloody King shirt there. We appreciate that. John, thank you again so much for coming on, sir. We really, really appreciate you being on here.
Oh, always fun with you guys. Always fun.
Awesome. Lee, thank you, man. Appreciate you always. Thank you, man. It's good to be back doing this again.
Yeah. Need to go out for some boom boom.
Yes.
Big strong men like you's not afraid of some boom boom, are you?
No. Well, we'll see. I'm Kevin on behalf of Lee and our special guest, John. Thanks, everyone, for listening. And join us again next time here on the Fandom Podcast Network for another episode of Bloody Kings, a Highlander podcast. That sensation you are feeling is the quickening. We are one. We are brothers.
Farewell, dear shitheads.
Goodbye, everyone.